Welcome. Today I want to talk about one of the most brilliant feats in recent shogi history. I'm talking about a 17-year-old player, Sota Fujii, who won one of the 8 Japanese shogi titles, the 8 major titles. And the title that he won is the Kisei title, and he beat the title holder Akira Watanabe, one of the strongest players in recent shogi history, to achieve this feat. By doing this, Fujii became the youngest player to ever win one of these 8 major titles. So big congratulations on that. And I want to show you the final game which Fujii played against Watanabe. So Fujii played with Gote, Watanabe played Sente, and Watanabe played the move pawn to 7f to start the game. And as we will see, both players play static rook, so they keep the rook on the initial squares. So let me say that, of course, I don't understand all of the moves which they are playing, but at least I wanted to make this video to give the English-speaking community. Silver, of course, blocks the advance of the pawn to 2d. And now both players form a castle. So the castles are symmetric. This is kind of a crab castle where the silver is. So both players will not go into a full Yagura castle, but they will stick for the whole game like this. Of course, the problem with the crab castle is a little bit that you can get rook drops on the back rank, and your king is pretty vulnerable for that. So let's see how the game continues. So here you see the advance of this pawn, which sometimes has the idea to advance one square further, and then of course the rook becomes free on this rank. And now we see some further moves. So I guess here, if the pawn advances to 8f, then Watanabe can just take and drop another pawn here, or he doesn't even have to do it. So at this point, there is no big sense in advancing the pawn. Yeah, and now after some deeper moves, which I don't understand, we reach a position where Watanabe takes action. So he advances the pawn now, and now questions what Fujii intends to do with the center, and Fujii takes the pawn. So right now, he just takes back, and Watanabe attacks this knight. This knight has nowhere to move. Watanabe plays this move pawn to 2d, and yeah, of course now now Fujii cannot take the knight, because then one would just take the pawn and promote. So one first has to care about this pawn, take the pawn, and now Watanabe defends the knight with a silver. Well, why all of this? Well, now the rook is of course a bit more mobile, and this knight could potentially be a bit annoying. We will see this in the game, that this might start actually an attack. So now the bishop comes back. Bishop sees that it's better placed on this diagonal, because now the action starts in the center, so it makes a lot of sense to redeploy the bishop to 2b. And Watanabe now starts an attack with the pawn move, takes, and rook takes on 2d. Now rook takes on 2d. Watanabe now has 2 pawns in hand and might drop one pawn potentially here or here later on, and therefore Fujii just dropped a pawn on 2c to kick away the rook, and Watanabe retreated to the back rank, and now Fujii takes very concrete action. He weakens the castle a little bit, but he now attacks this knight with his gold. So of course you cannot just drop the knight here. So Watanabe played the move pawn to Fujii to take this pawn with a knight, because otherwise if you move the gold, this pawn on to c is unprotected. So after takes, we get this position where, of course, but on the other hand, this is still a relatively solid castle, and yeah, we're going to see how the game continues. Watanabe plays this knight drop. Now Fujii does not remove the gold, but directly goes for a counterattack with a pawn drop on 4e. This attacks the silver, and the idea is if Watanabe takes the gold, I think Fujii would just take back with the silver. So Watanabe plays the move silver to 5e, and now Fujii starts an attack on his own with this pawn move, pawn to 8f. Yeah, at first glance you might think, okay, you can just take, but now Fujii comes up with this very creative move, knight to 9d, so knight drop to 9d, attacking this pawn. I have to say, when I saw this move, it looked a little bit slow, but it's very difficult for Watanabe to enter with his rook. So therefore, probably this is a very strong move. Okay, this was answered with a pawn move to 8e. If the rook now takes, I assume that that the idea is probably to drop a pawn somewhere here. But yeah, instead of doing that, Fujii goes with the move knight to 7c, attacking this pawn with the other knight. And then, of course, the idea would be to have ideally both knights on these squares 8e and 8f. And two knights together can sometimes be a quite lethal attacking combination. So yeah. Watanabe now tries to capture the knight, which of course now runs to 8f, sorry, forcing the gold to move away. And now the attack continues with this pawn move to 4f. Now, what's the idea of this move? I guess, again, to weaken the castle. Potentially you can drop something later on this square, or maybe even you can promote the pawn and deflect this gold from being in the strong castle position. So therefore, Watanabe decides to take the pawn, and now Fujii moves his gold finally and no longer allows Watanabe to take off the gold with the knight. But after the bishop move, the knight is attacked, and yeah, now a very tactical phase starts where Fujii takes the knight, and Watanabe also takes a knight. The gold now moves here to go out of this line of the rook and attacks the silver. The silver moves forward. And when I saw this position, I thought Watanabe had a quite nice position because this bishop now seems to be very strong, so it can potentially attack this pawn on 5c. Fujii came up with this nice pawn drop. I think it's also a pretty typical motive. You lose two times, so to drop and then to take the knight, but afterwards you have a very annoying token on the back rank of your opponent. And especially with this castle, this seems to be quite important because now you have a second side from which you can attack this king. Takes, and bishop takes on 6d. So still, when I saw this position, my feeling, and of course I cannot really judge the position, but my feeling was that Watanabe is better here because the bishop is very active. But yeah, Fujii came up with this interesting knight drop. So this knight drop defends both the knight and this pawn. And Watanabe came up with this knight drop of his own, attacking the knight and the pawn again. So now Fujii just took off the knight. And still, I mean, it's not entirely clear how you want to mate this king, because it can still run in this direction. This gold is, of course, now a strong piece in that sense, but it's not totally clear how you want to attack this king. So I still thought that it would be decent for Watanabe, who now took this pawn, takes, and promoted his bishop. Right now the rook is attacked, and instead of defending the rook, Fuji played this silver move. Now the point here is that if you now take this rook, Fuji could take this rook, and then you threaten a mate by dropping the rook here. So therefore, Watanabe decided to remove the rook. And this is like one of the only squares where you can move the rook, because here it's taken on virtually any square, and if you move to 2e, then for instance with a pawn move, you can also capture the rook. So this is the only way of saving the rook for Watanabe. But now, of course, you see that the king is a little bit cramped here. So you can no longer run in this direction. And Fuji continued the attack with a knight drop to 8f, taking away this square for the king. So now the king has no more squares to run to. So just one drop with, for instance, a gold to this square would end the game. And now Watanabe came up with this move, which was quite unexpected to me, to be honest. I think the idea is to play against a knight drop to this square 4g. Because with a knight drop to this square, you would win a rook or a gold, and therefore then you would threaten a mate here. So I think this was the idea, but as I said, quite unexpected. But it's very interesting for me to see like how strong this attack of Fuji is suddenly. So you don't have that many pieces actually in attack, but due to this cramped position, check with the dragon, and after this pawn drop, which makes a lot of sense, which protects the knight, Watanabe continued with the knight drop to 6d. And now, of course, the idea is to just take this pawn on 5b, and to exchange everything, afterwards drop a rook to the b rank, and then maybe to somehow mate. But Fuji was unimpressed, just dropped the knight to 4f. Again, this requires now a lot of concrete calculation, and as we are going to see, so now Watanabe removes the gold, but if you now are in this position, you have to calculate a line which starts with knight takes here, rook takes, dragon takes, and so on, check, but apparently this is not enough for a mate. So the gold is removed, and another knight joins the attack. So Fuji even withdraws one more potential defender from the king and really goes all out for this attack. Of course, right now, in case he gets this gold, there is this big threat of mating on the square. So therefore, Watanabe now decided to start the attack, takes, and now removed the dragon. So I think in this position, again, you have to calculate what happens if you take the rook, but the king can just take back, and after a rook drop here, let's say, you still have a knight to drop on that square. So I think it's not yet lethal. So well seen by Fuji. Of course, I cannot see through all these lines, but this seems to be the case. So right now, because Fuji threatens to take the gold, Watanabe decided to take off the knight. And now the gold joins the attack. Now Watanabe decides to also take off the knight. And at first glance, it might again appear as if this attack runs dry. But after gold takes, one potential threat is to take here. And then this also looks very, very strong. So Watanabe decided to remove the rook. And now it's really the time where you need to find a way to get one more piece. So all that Fuji needs is one more piece, one more gold, for instance, to insert here, but it's not so easy to achieve. So the way to do it is to drop the knight. Now again, attacking this gold and the silver. And yeah, so here now Watanabe decided to make a knight drop on his own, not to lose any of the generals without any counterplay. So understandably, Fuji took the gold, which now threatens mate on the square 7i. And now Watanabe started the attack on his own with a check. And yeah, here, as you can see, Watanabe has quite some pieces in his arsenal, but interestingly, it's not enough to force a mate. So I was quite surprised by that, to be honest, but it seems like this king can run over in this direction. So for instance, if we now start with a silver drop or something, let's say 6c, then the king could run to 4d and then probably just run in this direction and be safe enough to avoid a mate. So that was quite interesting to me, and of course, on the other hand, now it's very, very difficult for Watanabe to avoid being mated by this gold drop. Check, just a pawn drop, and now knight check. The king runs, so even allowing Watanabe to take this pawn with a check, but I assume that then the king would just run further. So instead of doing that, Watanabe gave a check with a pawn. The idea is to deflect the gold. So if the gold was to take, one could take with the rook and promote here, and then the king would be very vulnerable. And after a silver drop, probably Fuji would get mated. So instead of doing that, of course, Fuji just runs to 3a with his king, and now still has one piece left, this very knight here, which he can drop on 4a. And now the last piece that he has in hand is this gold, but exactly this gold is now lethal because it will just be dropped on that square here. Yeah, and now the attack runs out of steam, so it also doesn't bring any benefits to drop a silver here, because then I think black is already Fuji is already up for choice. You can just take twice, and nothing would really happen. So in this position, Watanabe resigned. Yeah, so thanks a lot for watching this video on this historic chess game played by Sota Fuji. My congratulations to Sota Fuji for winning the Kisei title, and I will definitely follow his development, and I hope that he will win many more major titles in Shogi. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time.